Today, we're going to get into a story that's, well, it's pretty complex and honestly, it's disturbing. We're talking about environmental injustice and this global trade in toxic waste. So let me just start by asking you something. Have you ever heard of forever chemicals? Chances are, even if that term is new to you, you are literally surrounded by them right now. I'm talking about thousands of products we all use every single day. Things like waterproof fabric, your yoga pants, shampoo, even the packaging your food comes in. I mean, they're everywhere. But the story of where these chemicals, which are, super useful but also super persistent, where they come from, and maybe more importantly, where they go when we're done with them, well, that's where things get pretty dark. It really reveals a hidden side of our global economy. Okay, so let's dive right in. First up, the problem with forever chemicals. All right, so what exactly are these things? The technical term is PFAS, which stands for a real mouthful, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. But here's what you really need to know. Industries love them for one reason. They're amazing at resisting heat, oil, and water. But that superpower, that's also what makes them so dangerous. They just don't break down, not in the environment, not in our bodies. And that's how they get that really chilling nickname, forever chemicals. And because they stick around forever, they can cause some really severe health problems. I mean, this is not a small risk we're talking about here. There are links to all kinds of cancers, liver damage, thyroid disease, major fertility and reproductive issues, even a weaker immune system. That's what's really at stake when we talk about being exposed to PFAS. Okay, so to make this whole thing feel a bit more real, let's zoom in on one specific case. This is a story that really brought the issue to the world's attention. We're talking about a huge scandal in Italy. So the story kicks off back in 2013. Environmental agencies in Italy, they found something truly shocking. Turns out a chemical plant called Miteni in a town called Trissino had been leaking PFAS and caused this just massive, widespread contamination of the local groundwater. And the scale here, it's just staggering. Get this, 350,000. That's how many people were potentially drinking this contaminated water, possibly for decades. An entire region just poisoned. So after years of investigations and a massive trial, it looked like justice was finally served. In a landmark case in 2025, former managers from the plant were actually convicted of intentionally poisoning the water. I mean, this was a huge victory for environmental justice. And so the case was closed. But was it really? And this is where the story takes a huge turn. This brings us to the real heart of what we're talking about today, the pollution that moved. There's this quote that it hits the nail on the head. When regulations tighten in Europe, pollution is often not being solved, only relocated. This gets at a concept that's often called environmental colonialism or toxic colonialism. So you have to wonder, what actually happened to that Miteni plant? Well, journalists did some digging and found out the problem didn't just vanish. No, the whole factory was dismantled, shipped overseas, and put back together in India. And this contrast here just perfectly shows the double standard. Over in Italy, you've got criminal prosecutions, a public health emergency, and production is shut down for good. But then you look at India, the exact same dangerous production just starts right back up in a place without specific regulations for these chemicals, putting a whole new community in danger. And once this story broke in India, the reaction was, as you can imagine, immediate and intense. We're talking public protests. Locals were terrified their home was becoming a dumping ground. It set off political accusations, got huge attention online, and the whole thing was framed as exactly what it was, environmental colonialism. So how can this even happen? How is this possible? The truth is, this isn't just about one bad company making a bad decision. This is really a story about a deeply flawed global system. Okay, so this table really breaks down the legal loophole that lets this happen. See, there's this big international treaty, the Basel Convention, and it was created specifically to stop this kind of toxic colonialism. It says that developed countries, the global north, are banned from shipping their hazardous waste to developing countries in the global south. Simple, right? That's the top line, banned. But here's the catch, the really crucial part. Look at that second line. It allows the trade of the exact same toxic waste between developing countries. So that south-to-south flow, totally legal. And the problem here is that the whole system is built on this really outdated idea. It basically treats the entire global south as if it's all one and the same. But it's not. It completely misses the huge differences in power, wealth, and technology between these countries. And what does that do? It allows more powerful developing nations to become these new hubs for the toxic trade, basically exporting the harm to their less powerful neighbors. It's something the original treaty just never saw coming. Now, I know all this might feel like it's happening a world away, but the thing about PFAS is it's a global problem. And that brings us to a question that's a lot closer to home for all of us. What's in your water? So, a recent study from Duke and NC State actually looked into this, and the results are pretty eye-opening. Turns out, those under-the-sink reverse osmosis systems, they work great. They get rid of about 94% of PFAS. Awesome. But then, you look at the other options, the really common filters, the ones in a pitcher or in your fridge. Their effectiveness is all over the place. And get this, some of the whole house systems, if you don't maintain them perfectly, could actually end up increasing the amount of some PFAS in your water. So yeah, it's not as simple as just grabbing any old filter off the shelf. And that brings up a really important point, right? The filters that work the best are, of course, the most expensive. So you have to ask yourself, is telling people to just filter their own water a real solution? Or is clean water becoming a privilege for people who could afford it, while everyone else is just left exposed? Ultimately, all of this leads to our final point, because this isn't just about the environment, and it's not just a legal loophole. At its core, this is a question of human rights. So what's the alternative? How do we fix this flawed system? Well, one idea is to look at it through a human rights lens. This approach says that a country's responsibility doesn't just stop at its own border. The idea is that countries have what are called extraterritorial obligations. Fancy term, but it just means they have a duty to make sure companies inside their borders aren't causing predictable harm to people in other countries. It's about accountability that can actually cross a border. And really, that's the big question we want to leave you with. We know for a fact that these forever chemicals, they don't care about lines on a map. They travel through our water, our air, our entire global economy. So if the pollution itself has no borders, why should our responsibility?